Smoke billowed from the custom-built smoker like a dragon exhaling approval, and the scent of hickory and sizzling ribs danced through the neighborhood air like a seductive promise. Jason stood over his grill, tongs in one hand, beer in the other, grinning at his creation. It was supposed to be a private affair, just a handful of close friends and family for a weekend cookout that had become an annual tradition. It was his escape, his sanctuary, a backyard celebration of meat and peace. But that peace was about to be obliterated. The chaos began with the sound of high heels click-clacking on his stone pathway, followed by the unmistakable voice that could sour milk at 30 yards. "Oh hi Jason," Karen trilled, stepping into his backyard uninvited, wearing a leopard print shawl and an oversized sun hat. "I saw your little barbecue setup and thought how wonderful it is that you're hosting the official HOA summer potluck just like we planned." Jason blinked. Just like we planned was doing a lot of heavy lifting in that sentence, because there had been no plan, no conversation, and certainly no permission. He opened his mouth, but Karen was already unfolding a flyer and handing it to him with a manicured hand that trembled slightly from excitement or too much espresso. The flyer read Summer Heatwave Block Barbecue, sponsored by HOA Chairwoman Karen in bold Comic Sans, and featured a cartoon grill next to her own face. Jason tried to laugh, thinking it was a prank, but his neighbor Phil walked in through the side gate carrying potato salad and said, "Oh wow Karen, you were right, Jason really went all out this year, thanks man." Within minutes it became a parade of strangers flowing into his backyard. Folding chairs were set up without asking, children were already jumping into his pool with their shoes on, and someone plugged a karaoke machine into his outdoor outlet, blowing a fuse. Jason stood frozen, his spatula hovering midair, while his plans for a calm, relaxing Saturday were hijacked by the HOA's walking hurricane. "You can't just take over my event," he finally managed through clenched teeth. Karen, who was currently arranging deviled eggs on his patio table, turned to him with a smile that barely masked her condescension. "Jason sweetie, it's for the whole community, and you're part of that community, aren't you? Sharing is caring." That sentence echoed like a curse in his mind. Sharing is caring. Except he hadn't agreed to share, and he certainly didn't care to host a bunch of entitled freeloaders who didn't even knock before walking into his backyard. Then Karen did the unthinkable. She stepped up to his smoker, flipped the lid, and started poking his ribs with a plastic fork. The fury Jason felt in that moment was spiritual. He took a deep breath, pretending to smile. If she wanted a community barbecue, she was about to get one that no one would ever forget. He walked calmly back into the kitchen, passing his wife on the way. She raised an eyebrow as if to ask, "Are you okay?" and he gave her a look that said, "I'm about to be." Inside his pantry at the very back, hidden in a small wooden box, was a treasure he had been saving for a special moment. Hellkiss, the hybrid pepper he had nurtured for months. A monstrous blend of Carolina Reaper and ghost pepper genetically cultivated for flavor and burn. One pepper could season an entire pot. Eating it straight was considered an act of war. He took out 6 of them, laid them on the chopping board, and began slicing with reverence. Gloves on. Windows open. Fans running. He mixed them into a marinade with oil and vinegar, then laced a separate batch of wings with the infernal brew. To disguise them, he added a glistening honey glaze to make them look appealing, deceptively mild. He labeled the tray with a handwritten sign, "Inferno Wings, try at your own risk," and placed it dead center on the buffet table. Back outside, Karen was in full command mode, telling neighbors where to sit, moving Jason's speakers to play her summer playlist, and referring to the event as "my party" at least 3 times a minute. Jason simply smiled, served his other guests normally, and waited. The first victim was Brent, the wannabe CrossFit guy who prided himself on being able to eat anything. He grabbed 4 of the Inferno wings and posed for a selfie. 10 seconds after the first bite, he went into a coughing fit so intense he dropped his plate and dunked his face into the ice bucket. The crowd thought it was part of the entertainment until his eyes turned red and he started begging for milk. One by one people tried the wings, and the results ranged from whimpering to actual rolling on the ground. Then Karen got curious. "What's all the fuss?" she said, annoyed at the attention something else was getting. She snatched a wing and took a bite with a flourish. Jason watched her chew. There was a pause. Then it hit her. The way her face contorted was almost artistic. Her hat flew off. She screamed, but it came out as a strangled gasp. She ran toward the pool but was blocked by kids. She turned to the kitchen only to trip on a cooler. Her mascara began to run. Her voice cracked. "Who put this here?" she shrieked. Jason stepped forward, slowly holding up the label card. "You said it was for everyone. Community sharing, remember?" That moment burned itself into the memory of every person there. Phones came out. People were crying with laughter. Karen drenched her mouth with Sprite, thinking it would help. It didn't. She clawed at her tongue like it was on fire. Someone offered her ranch dressing, and she chugged it. Her husband, who arrived late, took one look at the scene and turned right back around. It was mayhem, but glorious, justified mayhem. And Jason captured it all with his backyard security cameras repositioned before the party began. He already knew what he would do with the footage. This was no longer about food. It was about reclaiming his space and exposing HOA entitlement on a level the internet would eat up like popcorn. The day ended with a fire truck showing up after someone dialed 911 when Karen claimed she was dying. Paramedics checked her vitals and told her she was just experiencing extreme capsaicin exposure and needed to calm down. She demanded Jason be arrested. The officer asked if there was any illegal activity. Jason calmly pointed to the sign. The officer squinted, read it, then said, "Ma'am, maybe don't touch food that says danger on it." Karen stomped off, dripping in milk and shame. Jason watched her go, a satisfied smirk curling on his face. That night, as he backed up all the camera footage, he began to plan. Not just his next barbecue, but his next move. The internet would soon meet HOA Karen. And the inferno wings were just the beginning. By the next morning, the neighborhood was still buzzing from what many were calling the most unforgettable HOA barbecue in history. The group chats were flooded with memes, blurry photos of Brent face down in an ice bucket, and blurry shots of Karen mid-scream, clutching her tongue like it had betrayed her. Jason sipped his coffee and scrolled through it all, quietly amazed at how fast chaos had gone viral locally. He hadn't even uploaded his own footage yet. Part of him considered letting it go, chalking it up as a one-time laugh. But when he stepped out onto his porch and saw a fresh HOA notice taped to his mailbox, all thoughts of peace evaporated. The notice was written in Karen's favorite passive-aggressive style. It accused Jason of violating community safety codes by serving unlabeled hazardous food, operating an unauthorized public event, and knowingly endangering neighborhood morale. He shook his head and laughed, not because it was funny but because of how utterly predictable it was. She had tried to hijack his barbecue, failed spectacularly, and now she was scrambling for control in the only way she knew how, through bureaucracy and half-baked threats. Jason walked inside, grabbed the letter, and added it to a small but growing folder labeled HOA Drama. Around noon, a knock came at the door. It was one of the HOA board members, a guy named Travis who normally avoided any kind of confrontation like it was a contagious disease. He held a clipboard and looked like he hadn't slept. "Sorry to bother you, Jason," he mumbled, "but we're holding an emergency board meeting tonight to discuss the incident. Karen says you violated 5 community rules, and we're obligated to let you speak if you want." Jason invited him inside and offered him a soda. Travis glanced around like Karen might burst through a window at any moment. "Look, man, between you and me, that was the funniest thing I've seen in years. But Karen is making a scene about it. She's demanding you be fined, maybe even temporarily suspended from HOA voting privileges." Jason leaned against the counter and considered his options. He could play it safe and just attend the meeting, try to explain that it wasn't his fault. Or he could go full throttle and treat it like what it was, a ridiculous power play. He decided on the latter. If Karen wanted a formal battle, then he was happy to bring evidence. He spent the rest of the afternoon organizing his footage, pulling the clearest clips from his backyard cameras and editing them into a simple but damning reel. No narration, no music, just raw reality. Karen calling it her party, inviting the entire neighborhood without permission, laughing at his decor as if it were hers, and of course, the glorious moment she bit into an inferno wing and immediately combusted in a public meltdown. That evening, the HOA board meeting was held in the local community center, a modest building with bad fluorescent lights and foldable chairs that squeaked with every move. Jason arrived to a full room. Word had spread. Even residents who normally skipped HOA meetings were in attendance, eager to see the fallout from what was being called Peppersgate. Karen sat at the front like a war general, arms crossed, eyes narrowed like she was about to launch a full frontal legal assault. Jason gave her a friendly wave. She didn't return it. The HOA president, a man named Harold who rarely spoke above a whisper, opened the meeting with a deep sigh and a roll call. Karen wasted no time launching her tirade. She listed grievances like she was reading from a courtroom transcript. Jason served dangerous food without warning. Children were crying. People were in pain. He made a spectacle out of community members. And worst of all, he allowed a hostile environment to flourish in what was supposed to be a wholesome event. Jason waited until she finished, then calmly walked to the front and plugged in his flash drive. "I'd like to present some footage for context," he said. The screen lit up with clear audio and visuals. There was Karen distributing flyers. Karen calling it her event. Karen scoffing when Jason said it was private. Then the moment of her grabbing a wing despite the giant handwritten label. Her expression turning from smugness to absolute firestorm. There was gasping in the room. A few people tried to hold in laughter. Even Harold cracked a small smile. When the video ended, the room fell into silence until one of the board members cleared his throat. "Well, that was comprehensive." Karen sputtered. She tried to dismiss it all as a smear campaign and demanded the video be removed from record. But it was too late. Everyone had seen it. The president spoke next. After reviewing the evidence, it's clear that Jason acted within his rights. His signage was visible. His property was used appropriately. This appears to be a misunderstanding, escalated by unauthorized assumptions. The board will not pursue disciplinary action. Karen's mouth dropped. That wasn't the answer she expected. Her face turned redder than the sauce on those wings. She stood abruptly, muttered something about legal representation, and stormed out of the meeting like a cartoon villain. The door slammed behind her. The rest of the room relaxed almost immediately. A few people clapped quietly. One neighbor even approached Jason and asked if he had more of those wings. Jason smiled. "Maybe next time. Bring milk." The next few days were calm on the surface, but Jason could feel the tension building underneath. Karen had been publicly embarrassed, and that kind of ego doesn't just heal quietly. She stopped waving at neighbors. She started filing complaints about everything from garden gnomes to garbage bins. Her latest move was reporting Jason's solar lights as an aggressive use of illumination. Jason shook his head at the absurdity. It was like living next to a sitcom antagonist whose only weapon was paperwork. But he wasn't just sitting back. He upgraded his security cameras. He installed a noise meter to log decibel levels in case she tried to accuse him of party violations. He even kept a digital diary documenting every interaction with her. Not because he was afraid, but because he knew Karen wasn't finished. And next time, he wanted to be ready before she even made her move. One afternoon, while trimming his hedges, Jason noticed Karen in her front yard talking to a stranger in a suit. They glanced toward his property more than once. Jason kept working but filed the image away. He had a feeling something bigger was coming. But for now, he would keep smiling, keep cooking, and keep every camera rolling. Because in this war of patios and paperwork, evidence was everything. And he had a whole lot of it. The calm that settled over the neighborhood after the HOA meeting felt deceptive, like the eerie quiet before a summer storm. Karen had been humiliated, yes, but she hadn't vanished. Jason knew better than to believe it was over. She wasn't the type to let public embarrassment slide without a grudge-fueled campaign to claw back some twisted sense of justice. So when a new complaint arrived on Monday morning, this time for unauthorized patio decor that may visually upset passers-by, he didn't even bother to get angry. Instead, he smiled and added it to the folder. It was the 6th complaint in 9 days. One of them was about his hose being too green. By now, Jason had turned complaint tracking into a routine. He started logging each notice by date, topic, and absurdity rating. The hose complaint earned an 8 out of 10 for creativity. He printed out Karen's most ridiculous submissions and taped them to the inside of his garage wall. It had become something of a shrine to petty HOA madness, and his friends would come over just to marvel at the lengths Karen would go to in the name of imaginary law and order. But Jason wasn't just laughing. He was observing, collecting, and preparing. He had a feeling her next move wouldn't be just on paper. She was up to something, and he needed to know what. That something revealed itself the following weekend. Jason had gone to the hardware store to pick up parts for a rain barrel he was installing. When he got home, he found a city inspector standing on his property, clipboard in hand, examining the new grill area he had added weeks ago. The inspector, a polite but nervous woman named Denise, explained that an anonymous tip had reported Jason for operating an unlicensed food business. Jason blinked, then chuckled. He offered her a lemonade and walked her around the setup. Everything was standard backyard equipment. No sales, no signs, no food service, just one guy who liked ribs and hated bureaucracy. Denise apologized and left, but not before quietly warning Jason, "Honestly, we've been getting a lot of these kinds of calls lately. Some neighbors just don't know when to quit." Jason didn't need to guess who it was. Karen was escalating. She had tried to win through rules, then public shaming, and now she was resorting to false reports to outside agencies. It was desperate, calculated, and almost impressive in its pettiness. But she wasn't subtle. Jason had seen her speaking with that man in a suit, and now he had confirmation that she was coordinating something behind the scenes. What she didn't know was that he had upgraded his entire property's security system. There were now discrete cameras installed not just at his doors but angled toward the street, the sidewalk, and even the mailbox. Motion sensors tracked activity. If Karen so much as coughed near his fence, he'd have it in 1080p. The footage from 2 days prior proved revealing. Late at night, Karen had walked up to his fence with a flashlight, accompanied by the same man in the suit. They didn't enter, but they peeked over the fence, pointing at his patio, whispering, taking note. It was unnerving but also hilarious. Jason forwarded the footage to his lawyer friend, who confirmed there was no legal violation here. They hadn't trespassed yet. But it proved Karen's obsession was escalating, and Jason decided it was time to get a little more creative. He began planning a new barbecue, this one private and invite only, but with a twist. It would be called the Taste Your Limits Challenge. Everyone who showed up would sign a waiver. There would be medics on site. The wings would be crafted using a scientifically measured mix of pepper oils, enough to be safe but intense. The goal wasn't just revenge anymore. It was transformation. Jason was turning his personal feud into performance art, backed by legal caution and hilarious public relations. And the best part? The guest list would include a food blogger known for documenting HOA overreach and suburban absurdity. If everything went well, Karen wouldn't just be famous in the neighborhood. She'd be a case study. But before he could launch the event, Karen struck again. This time, it was personal. She had filed a formal complaint with the city zoning board claiming that Jason's new patio extension violated setback regulations. That wasn't just a fine or a warning. If it stuck, it could mean forced removal. Jason didn't panic. He pulled out the original blueprints, verified the distance from the property line, and marched straight to the zoning office with documentation in hand. The clerk, a cheerful guy named Alan, recognized him from the barbecue video that was still circulating online. After reviewing the papers, Alan laughed and said, "She must really hate wings." The zoning board dismissed the complaint on the spot. Another Karen plan dismantled with paperwork. Still, Jason felt the pressure mounting. Karen was relentless, and though each of her attempts failed, she was wasting his time and dragging him into meetings, paperwork, and inspections. It wasn't just about his backyard anymore. It was about setting an example. If he didn't do something soon, she'd just keep going, finding new cracks to exploit. Then one evening, while walking his dog near the park, Jason ran into Harold, the HOA president. They made small talk for a bit, then Harold leaned in slightly and said, "Off the record, Karen's trying to rally votes to get you banned from hosting any more events. She thinks if she paints you as a repeat offender, the board will cave." Jason smiled politely, nodded, and said, "Thanks for the heads up." Then he went home and hit record on a new video. He uploaded a teaser trailer titled Spicy HOA Part 2. It showed slow-motion clips of peppers being chopped, meat sizzling, and a table with medical gloves and waiver forms. No faces. No direct references. Just a taste of what was to come. The video spread fast. People started asking when the event would be. Food fans, neighbors, even local reporters reached out. Jason kept the date vague for now, but the buzz was building. He hadn't revealed the best part yet. Jason had been quietly working on a partnership with a local hot sauce brand known for creating absurdly spicy concoctions. Together, they were developing a limited edition sauce called Karen's Kiss of Fire. The label featured a cartoon woman breathing flames while holding a clipboard. Proceeds would go to a neighborhood beautification fund. Irony included at no extra charge. The day after the teaser dropped, Karen walked past his house 3 times in the morning alone. She didn't wave. She didn't smile. She just glared. Jason waved each time, cheerful as ever. Because while she was busy fighting a war with fake rules and imaginary power, he was creating something real, something lasting, something that turned her tyranny into entertainment for thousands. She had wanted attention. Now she had it. And he wasn't even finished yet. The real fire was still coming. The morning of the Taste Your Limits challenge began with a sky so blue it looked painted. Jason stood in his backyard, sipping coffee and watching the crew set up folding tables, a portable tent for shade, a hydration station, and a medic booth with a friendly EMT team that had volunteered in exchange for free wings and a little publicity. Everything was falling into place. His wife had been skeptical at first, asking if it was worth it to poke the bear again, but when she saw how organized and upbeat the setup was, and how many people were genuinely excited, she finally smiled and told him to go make history. By noon, the backyard looked more like a controlled chili warfare zone. Cameras were mounted at angles that caught every corner of the setup. A waiver table greeted every guest, and each participant signed a humorous but legally sound release form. Bottles of Karen's Kiss of Fire sauce were arranged in neat little rows, complete with a table banner that read "Taste carefully. Ego not included." What made it perfect wasn't just the event or the buzz. It was who had RSVP'd the night before. He hadn't expected her to show up, but she did. Karen arrived at 1 p.m. sharp, wearing all white like she was headed to a yacht party, not a backyard inferno. She walked past the waiver table, refused to sign anything, and simply hovered near the front gate with crossed arms and a resting glare that could ruin crops. A few guests noticed her and exchanged knowing looks. She had become a neighborhood legend, though not in the way she had ever intended. One of Jason's friends whispered, "If she touches the wings again without signing the waiver, this could make national news." Jason nodded without a word and returned to the grill. The event kicked off with laughter and energy. The first wave of guests began sampling the mild batch of wings, enjoying the smoky flavors and the games Jason had set up: bean bag toss, trivia, and a Guess the Pepper challenge. Then came round 2, the serious contenders who signed up for the heat test. These brave souls lined up in front of the Taste Your Limits table, where Jason personally served each wing, explaining the Scoville level and giving them 5 seconds to reconsider. Most didn't. The first few reactions were priceless: tears, red faces, exaggerated gasping, but it was all in good fun. Water bottles were ready, ice cream tubs were stocked, and the EMTs only needed to hand out napkins. Then the food blogger arrived, a local celebrity known online as the Suburban Flame. She had driven in from across the city just to attend the challenge. Dressed in a fireprint apron and holding a GoPro mounted on a shoulder rig, she was every bit the enthusiastic chaos seeker her followers expected. Jason greeted her warmly, gave her the VIP sampling tray, and watched as she recorded her reactions live. The moment she tasted Karen's kiss of fire, she let out a dramatic scream, pounded her chest, and declared it the most violently delicious thing she'd ever eaten. Her live stream was already pushing thousands of views. That was when Karen moved. She crossed the lawn with the entitled stride of someone who thought her presence alone could rewrite events. She approached the table where the hot sauce bottles were displayed, looked directly into the nearest camera, and picked one up like it had personally offended her. "This is harassment," she said loudly. "You're using my name and image without consent." Jason stepped forward calmly. "Your name is not on the label, Karen. It's a fictional character. And this is satire. Perfectly legal." She threw the bottle down, which landed with a satisfying squirt on her white pants. The crowd gasped. Someone coughed to hide a laugh. A child pointed and said, "Mommy, she spilled fire juice." Jason kept his voice level. "You're welcome to stay and watch. But if you touch anything else or interfere with guests, you'll be trespassing. This is a private event on private property." The look on Karen's face said she knew it. Still, she wasn't ready to leave. She lingered, scowling, watching, trying to find some angle or excuse to cause a scene. But there was none. The event was permitted, the safety measures were visible, and the community was having a blast. Karen had become nothing more than an unwilling mascot for everything wrong with HOAs, and she couldn't stand it. Around 3 p.m., the video from the Suburban Flame began to go viral. Jason's inbox exploded with messages. Other bloggers wanted to collaborate. A pepper company offered a sponsorship deal. Even a talk show producer sent a message asking if he'd appear in a segment called Suburban Showdowns. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he turned his attention to his neighbors, the real reason he had done all of this. They were smiling, laughing, bonding over tears of spice and ice water. They weren't afraid of Karen anymore. Her power had evaporated not with a fight, but with laughter. Jason walked over to the hydration tent and grabbed a water bottle, taking a quiet moment to observe the transformation. His yard was no longer a battleground. It was a celebration. And it wasn't just about heat levels or wings. It was about reclaiming control from a system that had been hijacked by entitlement and ego. The HOA had rules, yes, but they didn't exist to serve a self-appointed queen. They existed to protect community, not strangle it. As the sun began to dip behind the trees, Jason gathered everyone for one final toast. They raised bottles, milk cartons, and slushy cups in unison as he thanked them for coming and for helping him turn one of the most annoying situations of his life into something memorable. He thanked the EMTs, the blogger, the sauce brand, and yes, even Karen, for inspiring the madness. That line got a roar of laughter, and even a reluctant smirk from across the lawn. Karen, now splattered with sauce and ego bruises, walked back toward her car without another word. No screaming, no threats, just quiet defeat. She had come hoping to regain control. Instead, she had walked into the most organized and bulletproof event her HOA had ever seen. Later that night, Jason uploaded a new video. It was a recap of the event, edited tastefully, with humor, consented clips, and highlights of all the best reactions. It included a time-lapse of the backyard setup, close-ups of the wings, and even a blooper reel at the end. The video hit 50,000 views in 2 hours. The comment section was full of people cheering him on, sharing their own HOA horror stories, and asking where they could buy Karen's Kiss of Fire. Orders flooded the small website Jason had set up as a joke. Now it wasn't a joke anymore. As he sat back on the porch, watching the stars peek out one by one, Jason realized he had done more than just survive Karen. He had turned her tactics against her without ever raising his voice. He didn't fight dirty. He didn't break rules. He just turned on the lights and let the world watch. The power of public shame, mixed with peppers and a dash of satire, had done what countless HOA meetings could not. Karen wasn't just defeated. She was irrelevant. And that was the real victory. Jason woke up the next morning to the sound of birds chirping, the faint hum of traffic, and an inbox overflowing with new messages. The Taste Your Limits Challenge video had crossed 100,000 views overnight, and the buzz was louder than ever. Local news channels were reaching out for interviews. A podcast that focused entirely on bizarre HOA stories invited him on for a special segment. The hot sauce sales went from a novelty trickle to a steady stream, and the Karen's Kiss of Fire brand became a running joke on multiple meme pages. But more than that, something had shifted in the community. Neighbors who used to stay behind their hedges now waved when they walked by. People he barely knew came over to thank him for standing up to the chaos that had plagued them for years. The mood was lighter. The fear of stepping on HOA eggshells had cracked. And in the middle of all of it, Karen had gone almost completely silent. Jason hadn't seen her outside since the event. Her blinds stayed drawn. Her car was missing from the driveway most days. Some said she had gone on a trip to regroup. Others guessed she was hiding from the second wave of online fame her meltdown had inspired. But Jason knew better. Karen wasn't the type to give up. She was the type to pause, strategize, and then attempt one last desperate play. And just as he expected, the quiet ended with a thud. Literally. A thud on his front porch followed by the rustling sound of paper shoved into the mailbox. He opened the door and found a manila envelope marked with legal insignia. Inside was a cease and desist letter. The document accused him of defamation, unlawful use of likeness, commercial exploitation, and mental distress. Attached were printed screenshots from his video, the hot sauce label, and a highlighted paragraph claiming emotional damages caused by public ridicule. Jason read it all without a flinch, set it on the kitchen counter, and called his lawyer. By the time they hung up, Jason had confirmation of what he suspected. The letter was an empty threat. The video featured no names, no defamation, and all participants were on private property at a voluntary event. As for the label, the character on the bottle was generic. No name. No real likeness. Just a flaming cartoon woman with a clipboard. Satire was protected. Fair use was clear. Karen was bluffing with a handful of dust, hoping it would cloud the success he had built. Jason wasn't worried. But he wasn't done either. He decided it was time to go from defense to offense, not out of spite but out of principle. The next HOA board meeting was just around the corner. This time, Jason came prepared not with videos or defense statements but with something entirely different. He had drafted a new proposal for the community charter, a clause that required all HOA event announcements to be voted on publicly with a written plan submitted at least 2 weeks in advance. He also included a clause limiting the authority of individual members to act on behalf of the HOA without majority consent. The goal wasn't to make life harder for the board. It was to prevent one person from ever again hijacking an event, twisting the rules, or abusing power under the banner of community good. He had no illusions that Karen would support it. But he had something better. He had the support of nearly everyone else. When Jason stood up to present the proposal, the room was full. Not just board members, but regular homeowners who normally skip these meetings. He kept it brief. No theatrics. No mention of Karen by name. Just a clear summary of what had happened, why the system had failed to stop it, and how this simple amendment could protect every homeowner going forward. When he finished, the room broke into applause. Not polite clapping, but actual applause. Even Harold, the normally stoic president, cracked a smile and gave him a nod of approval. The vote wasn't even close. The motion passed overwhelmingly. Karen sat rigid in her chair, her face unreadable, her fingers clenched around the edges of the table. She didn't speak. She didn't argue. She just got up after the vote and left the room without looking back. Word spread quickly. The HOA had changed. For the first time in years, residents felt they had a voice again. The rules that once felt like shackles were now being refined, reshaped by the very people they were supposed to serve. Jason had become more than just the guy with the grill. He was the neighbor who stood up, stayed calm, and outwitted a system too used to silence. People began asking if he'd consider running for the board. He always laughed and shook his head. He didn't want a title. He just wanted his backyard back, and he got it. A few weeks later, Jason received another letter. This one was written in plain handwriting, no envelope. It had been slipped under his door in the middle of the night. It simply said, "Congratulations on your little victory. Enjoy it while it lasts." He recognized the handwriting. It was Karen's. There was no signature, but the spite leaked off the page like oil. Jason folded it neatly, added it to the folder, and closed the drawer. Her words didn't scare him. If anything, they confirmed that he had won something she couldn't take away: respect, support, and the power of truth documented and shared. In the months that followed, Jason's videos evolved into something more. He began highlighting other HOA stories, interviewing people from across the country who had dealt with similar nightmares. He created a series called Behind the Fence, where homeowners could share how small power can lead to big problems. It wasn't just about entertainment anymore. It was about helping people understand their rights, their communities, and how to push back without burning bridges. Unless it was for ribs, of course. Karen eventually put her house up for sale. The listing was quiet, the open house unannounced. One day the for sale sign appeared, and 2 weeks later it vanished with a sold sticker slapped across the front. She never said goodbye to anyone. No farewell email. No final tantrum. Just silence and departure. Some said she moved to a stricter community. Others joked she had joined an underground HOA league where clipboard tyrants trained in secrecy. Jason never really cared. Her absence was the real gift. Her departure marked a new chapter not just for him, but for everyone on the block. On the anniversary of the original barbecue, Jason hosted another one, but this time it wasn't about revenge. It was about celebration. The tables were packed, the grills were hot, and the laughter was real. Kids played games in the yard, neighbors passed around plates, and a group gathered around a projector to watch the original viral video that started it all. Everyone still laughed at the moment Karen took that fateful bite, but now it was with a sense of release, of closure. It had been a ridiculous journey, but one that brought people together in the most unexpected way. That night, after everyone left and the last coals dimmed, Jason sat on his porch with his wife, both of them sipping iced tea and watching the stars. They didn't talk much. They didn't have to. The silence was the reward. Peace had returned, not because someone gave it back, but because it had been reclaimed, one pepper at a time, one camera angle at a time, one act of calm defiance at a time. And somewhere out there, Karen probably still thought she had the last word. But in Jason's neighborhood, the final say would always belong to the people who showed up, stood tall, and remembered to bring milk.